I'm just going to be upfront and honest with you. When I started this video, all I wanted to do was talk about an Italian wine that has gorgeous aromas and flavors of sour red cherries and goes well with pepperoni and mushroom pizza. I had no idea I was going to discover it was created by an Italian mad scientist in 1865, that it launched a powerful wine family dynasty that still exists to this day and was part of a major Italian wine scandal in 2008 that had rumors of mafia involvement. Yes, we are talking about Brunello di Montalcino, the little dark one of Italy's finest and most controversial wines that can sell for over $1,000 a bottle and collectors fight for it. I'm John Alanis, I'm a certified sommelier, and I'm going to tell you the wildest story you've ever heard about wine, and it starts in the 1840s with an eccentric named Clemente Santi. Now, Clemente Santi was born in 1827 into a prominent Montalcino, that's in Tuscany, El Greco estate. And that's going to be very important. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. He was a chemist, a pharmacist, an agronomist, and an amateur scientist. We'd call that a mad scientist, and so did the villagers that watched him work. You see, he had a scientific mind in an era where wine was often rustic, unstable, short-lived, and you have to understand Tuscan wines back then weren't like they are today. They didn't have the technology, they didn't have the know-how, they didn't have the winemaking skills. Back then, Tuscan wines, they were rough blends, and they got you where you wanted to go, and that was pretty much it. Clemente Santi believed that he could make a single varietal wine that could age like Bordeaux and Barolo using the Sangiovese clone, get this, called Sangiovese Grosso. Yep, and what he did was he would walk around through his vineyards, and it appeared like he was mumbling to his Sangiovese vines. Maybe they talked back to him, maybe not, but he was obsessed with his wine experiments. Villagers said that Clemente would lock himself in his cellar for days. He's tinkering with barrels, writing strange equations on scraps of paper, and some swore that he used pharmaceutical scales and glass vials, treating wine like medicine, not drink. I think that's the right way to treat it. In an age when wines turn sour within months, stories spread of Clemente Santi pouring a glass from an old cask that was years old and still fresh. And everybody started saying, oh my God, he's discovered the secret to eternal wine. Now, he experimented with long fermentations, careful racking, extended barrel aging, discovering that wine could be remarkably stable and age-worthy. And today, all of this is normal and customary to us, but back then, it was so revolutionary, it was considered mad. He did start to get some recognition, though, because in 1869, he took a red wine to an agricultural fair in Montepulciano, and he actually won a silver medal. And that wine is cited as the first Brunello, although he did not use the term Brunello. When Clemente Santi passed, he passed his wine traditions on to his grandson, Ferruccio Biondi-Santi, the father of modern Brunello. Ferruccio embraced the local nickname for Sangiovese, Grosso, which was Brunello, and it stood for Little Dark One, and he started branding the wine around purity and longevity, something that today we take for granted, but back then was extremely rare and almost magical. He engaged in rigorous vineyard selection, and he stabilized the Sangiovese clone, planting all of his vineyards to it, which is still used in all Brunellos today. And in 1888, Ferruccio bottled and cellared a wine made from 100% Sangiovese Grosso, aged exclusively in Slavonian oak. Some of these bottles still exist today, and that 1888 vintage was considered the first true Brunello di Montalcino. Some of the bottles from that vintage still exist today in the Biondi-Santi wine library. He also defined the winemaking formula, and he proved the ageability. So there is a formula for Brunello di Montalcino, which eventually went on to establish the regulations in the DOC when it was established in 1966. So what Ferruccio established was called the classic hallmarks of Brunello. 1. 100% Sangiovese Grosso. Long fermentation and maceration for structure and ageability. High acid, high tannin, or medium plus acid, medium plus tannin. It was designed to age in large oak casks to calm the wine down. These large Slavonian body and BOTTI, and years of bottle maturation before release. That still holds true today. Brunello di Montalcino has to stay in the bottle the longest of any Italian wine before it can be released to the market. We'll talk about that in a bit. Ferruccio passed his winemaking knowledge onto his son. As you can see, this is becoming a real dynasty here. Tancredi Biondi-Santi. And what he did was he codified Brunello rules, which became the template for the denomination de origine de controlli in the 1960s. But more importantly, he saved Brunello from the Nazis. During the occupation of Italy, he took small batches of the wine, hid them away so the Nazis wouldn't get to him, kept them out of the hands of occupying forces, and when the Second World War ended, boom, his properties came back to life because he knew his wine would outlast the occupation. What are the regulations that he came up with? For Brunello Normale, like this beautiful bottle of Livio Sassetti, 2 years in oak, and 4 months in bottle before release. If it's Reserva, it has to be 6 months. The neat thing is, and these are the regulations that are still important today, still in effect today, the earliest release is January 1st after the 5th year of harvest. It's 2025 right now. If someone tells you that they have a bottle of 2023 Brunello di Montalcino, they are lying to you. For Brunello Reserva, it has to be January 1st of the 6th year after harvest. And the number one thing too, after codifying all of these regulations that Tancredi did, because he wanted to make this one of the best known wines in the world, he passed the mentorship on to the next generation. As you can see, this is quite a family dynasty with a lot of iron control in Tuscany, and that leads to some pretty interesting things. Franco Biondi-Santi, who died in 2013, was Tancredo's son, and he really became the guardian of tradition of Brunello di Montalcino. He was almost fanatical about preserving the purity of Brunello. Always 100% Sangiovese Grossa from Il Greppo's vineyards. Il Greppo is as much of this part of this story as are the Biondi-Santi family. He was a big fan and fanatic of aging in large Slavonian oak barrels body, which imparts texture but not flavor, never in small French barriques. This will become important in a little bit. French barriques are 225 liters, Bordeaux, Burgundy are aged in them, and they impart flavors of vanilla, baking spices. They make the wines a little softer and a little more approachable early. But Franco did not want that. He wanted to maintain the unique style of Brunello di Montalcino and long release cycles, because his reserves were often released years and years after the harvest, not merely 6 years. He wanted it to be the absolute best. He oversaw the bottling of the legendary Reserva vintages, particularly the 1955, which is still considered one of the greatest Brunellos ever made today. And from the 1960s onward, Franco tirelessly promoted Brunello abroad. That's why I have a beautiful bottle of it in my hands today. When Brunello di Montalcino was granted DOC status in 1966 and later DOCG in 1980, Denomination de Origine de Controlli di Garantita, which is the highest level of DOC in Italy, much of the prestige that came from Brunello di Montalcino came from Franco's relentless advocacy and the reputation of his wines. He was a relentless promoter. He didn't just want it to be a local, regional, quirky wine. He wanted it to be up there in the Burgundies, the Bordeauxs, the Barolos, and he was successful. By the late 20th century, Brunello had become an international luxury wine, and the Biondi-Santi name carried almost mythical weight. Now, here's something very interesting. The Biondi-Santi family never copyrighted or trademarked the term Brunello di Montalcino, even though they came up with it, even though they promoted it, even though they were the ones responsible for the style. You see, they loved it so much, they wanted other producers from the same region to make Brunello di Montalcino with their own style. Within the regulations, of course, so that you would have a bunch of producers that would produce these beautiful wines with their own little spin on it, so that this wouldn't just be a one-off from one producer. It would be like Bordeaux or Burgundy, with hundreds of wonderful producers making the absolute best variations of Brunello di Montalcino possible. When you think about it, it's actually pretty crazy, because they could have kept it all for themselves, but no, they thought that if they let other people get in on the action too, that it would take Brunello to new heights, and they were right, and they probably made more money too. How much does Biondi-Santi go for? I mean, you can get it for about $130 to $150 a bottle, depending on the vintage. The Reserva, that can go upwards for $1,000 a bottle, and it is sought after by collectors. But Brunello di Montalcino can actually be an accessible wine. It's not going to kill you like trying to get into, let's say, Burgundies or top-end Bordeauxs. Whenever there's a legacy, whenever there's a dynasty established, what do we have next? We have a wine fight, because you're going to have invaders, you're going to have interlopers, you're going to have someone that's going to want to knock the king out of his castle. So in the 1970s, the traditionalists of Biondi-Santi were threatened by the Modernists, and there were rumors of mafia involvement. So what happened was this. In the 1970s, new money, new technology, and international taste preferences, particularly in the U.S., where Americans like their wine fruity, brought what was called the Modernist producers into Montalcino. You had Castello Banfi, which was founded in 1978 by the Mariana brothers from the U.S. They invested millions. They planted new vineyards. They brought in marketing, cleaner cellars, more science-driven viticulture. They pushed Brunello into global markets, especially America. And this was pretty much a good thing. Another one was Gianfranco Soldera from Case Basse. He arrived in the 1970s, outsider vision, and he produced intensely concentrated age-worthy wines, but in a little bit of a different style. And that led him to a clash philosophically with Biondi-Santi. Both of them rejected shortcuts, but both of them had a different style of the wine. And when you have traditionalists and modernists, like happened in Barolo at the same time too, you can get into some really nasty fights. So the modernist style was this. They still have to follow the regulations in Brunello di Montalcino DOCG. So still 100% Sangiovese Grossa, which is required by law, but they're aging in 225-liter French barriques. So what that does is it gives it aromas and flavors of vanilla, toast, cloves, baking spices, and a little bit softer tannins. So there's shorter maceration, so that leads it to a little fruitier and more approachable style. And the reason that they did this was when, that's called market-oriented winemaking. This was when the Robert Parker was really starting to ascend, and people in the U.S. started getting a taste for what were called steakhouse wines. Big, bold, fruity. I admire Robert Parker as a direct marketer, and I both like and dislike him as a wine critic. He had a particular style that he insisted upon, and steakhouse wine is a good, description of it. I like a good steakhouse wine every now and then, but I also like the pure, elegant, refined, subtle wines as well. And so what started happening is, this happened in Barolo with the Barolo boys, it happened in Brunello di Montalcino, is that you really had the wine splitting into two camps. You had the fruit-forward, I'm not going to say fruit bombs, but let's say fruitier and younger drinking wines. They were made by the modernists, and they were made to get Parker scores. But you had the traditionalists that fought back. They said, that is not Brunello, that is not Barolo, only we make the true stuff. And some of these fights got really, really, really nasty between the two camps. Because what happens with wine fights? They always lead to wine scandals. And in 2008, you had a scandal called the Brunello-Opoli scandal. Anytime there's an Italian scandal, they put Opoli after it, just like we put Gate in the U.S. after it. So if this happened in the U.S., it would be called Brunello-Gate. What happened was, in the early 2000s, wine critics and sommeliers started tasting some of the Brunellos, and they started saying, wait a second, these are a little bit softer, a little bit fruitier, a little bit darker, a little bit, there's something going on here. Something is not right. Then somebody got out a calculator, started doing the math and saying there is no way that they could produce this much Sangiovese Grossa with the yield requirements in Brunello di Montalcino. They are doctoring the wines. And so it turns out what happened was, for whatever crazy reason, great producers like Antinori were adding Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon and Syrah into what were supposed to be 100% Sangiovese wines because they were chasing scores. Italian wine authorities investigated, they tested some of the wines, and they found out that, yep, that had been happening. The scandal threatened Brunello's DOCG status because there was so much cheating going on for no reason, and their reputation as well. And the crazy thing about that to me was, by that time, the Super Tuscans were definitely all the rage. You could go do whatever the heck you wanted in Bulgaria under Toscana IGT and make beautiful wines. I mean, Sassicaia, Tiganello, Mesito, all this. They sell for hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Why they went to Brunello di Montalcino to do this, I have no idea. But sometimes in the wine world, they just get a little bit greedy. But what often happens in these scandals is this, is the authorities step in, they tighten up the regulations, the consumer base gets mad. And the consumers say, no, we want traditional Brunello di Montalcino with 100% Sangiovese Grossa, and boom, it snaps back to the traditionalist style. Biondi-Santi, when they heard about the scandal, they did not take part of it. They stood proudly apart, loudly and smartly declaring, Il Greppo has never betrayed Brunello. There was following this up in 2012, there was allegations of mafia involvement. Because some of these fights got really, really nasty. They thought the mafia might have been involved in some of the wine doctoring. That turned out not to be the case. It was just the producers, shall we say, maybe acting like a little bit of mafia. But in 2012, Gianfranco Soldera's Case Basse cellar was deliberately vandalized. A group of vandals broke in, forced their way in, went and opened all the taps with a body that was aging 6 vintages, dumped 60,000 liters of beautiful aging Brunello onto the floor, and almost destroyed 6 vintages. When the wine press heard about this, the international press heard about this, there were immediate rumors of mafia involvement. Was it a mafia hit? Were they not paying their bills? Did they owe money that they shouldn't? Did they disrespect someone? Nobody knew. The authorities started investigating, and it turns out that it was a little more ordinary than mafia involvement. It turns out it was a case of a disgruntled employee, Andrea De Casi, who snuck in, turned on the taps, destroyed the vintages because he thought he had been promised free housing when he worked at the winery. For real? Well, what happened was he was caught, he was arrested, he went to trial, and he got 4 years of free housing in an Italian penitentiary. And in my mind, the guy got off light. Turned out that they thought it was mafia involvement, and just a disgruntled employee. The result today, what tends to happen in these wine fights and these wine scandals is in wine, there usually turns out to be a happy ending for all of us. Enough time passes, the rancor between modernists and traditionalists start to fade, the wine ages, each of them starts drinking the other's wine saying, you know what, this is actually pretty good stuff. It's not as good as our stuff, but it's actually pretty good. And so what happens is you have a modernist tradition established and the traditionalist tradition that keeps going. So as wine consumers, we're fortunate to have 2 styles of Brunello di Montalcino. You have the one made for early drinking, which is going to be aged in French barriques and have a little bit more vanilla. It's going to be a little bit fruit forward. And you have the traditionalist style like this beautiful bottle of Livio Sassetti, which we are actually going to open and taste, and then I'm going to drink it and give you my proprietary whole bottle review. Once all this stuff gets into the press, people want to try Brunello di Montalcino. Production, exports skyrocketed, and the region became wealthy, and they're making some of the best Brunello di Montalcinos today. So traditionalists like Biondi-Santi are keeping the flame of tradition alive, authentic, long-aging Brunellos, and what they give the wine is what is called a moral backbone. I believe that. Luckily today, both styles coexist. You have classic bottlings like Biondi-Santi, Poggio di Sotto, Soldera, and then you have the, what would we call the fruit-forward ones, Banfi, Casanova, Deneri, etc. I lean towards the traditionalist, but my God in heaven, you can get some great modernist one as well. So what you do is you drink the modernist one while you're waiting for the traditionalist one to be ready. Again, the wine public wins. Enough talking, let's taste some Brunello di Montalcino. So what I have here is a 2016 Livio Sassetti made in the traditionalist style. It's been about 9 years now, and reading some of the reviews and some of the wine extras, they say this thing is right at entering its drinking peak, so I'm going to open it. I'm going to taste it, I'm going to drink the whole bottle and give you my whole bottle review. As I'm opening this, I'll tell you what we should expect from Sangiovese and Brunello di Montalcino. Sangiovese is going to be a medium plus acid, medium plus tannin grape. And the signature flavor of Sangiovese, but particularly Brunello di Montalcino, these wonderful sour cherries that you get on the nose and the palate. You can just get lost in them. Interestingly, it's a wine that pairs very well with tomato sauce. Aromas and flavors that you get in, tomato leaf, tomato, dried herbs, you get some earth, you get some leather, and you get some balsamic, VA, volatile acidity. To some people, it can come across as nail polish remover. To me, I love VA. It comes across as just this wonderful balsamic. I think it's an essential character of Italian wines. So these wines can go a very, very long time. This one has been aging for 9 years. It probably could go another 10, 20 years or so, but why wait? Let's drink Brunello di Montalcino now. What glass am I going to drink it in? I am going to drink it in, interestingly, a Syrah glass. This is a Riedel Syrah glass that is recommended for Sangiovese grapes. It looks like a tulip. It has a wide bowl. It narrows at the top. So what that does is it condenses the vapors. And when we nose it, we're just going to revel in that wonderful sour cherry. I am going to have a pepperoni and mushroom pizza because the earthiness of this wine can go well with the umami of the mushrooms, and every wine goes well with pepperoni and pizza. Sommelier secret. All right, we'll slowly take this out. Looks like we got it. Ooh, great cork after all. So, you can see there. Now, the color that you're going to get in Sangiovese, particularly Brunello di Montalcino, you can get ruby and you can get garnet. It's not as light looking a wine as, say, Pinot Noir or Burgundy, but it can be light in the glass. So, oh, we got a beautiful color there. That's actually quite a nice ruby. All right, let's take a sniff. And there you have it. Wonderful sour cherries on the nose. I get a little bit of dried herbs. Certainly that tomato is there. There may be a little bit of earth. But right now what I'm getting from this traditionalist style, I'm actually getting a lot of fruit. So let's stop sniffing and let's actually take a taste. Sour cherry, leather, a little dried herbs. This is going to be a beautiful bottle. I'm going to give this one an initial taste and swallow score of 95. I think this could go to 97. It might even go all the way to 98. We'll see, but that's why we do a whole bottle review, because you never know how the wine is going to evolve as you go through the bottle. As an honor to Clemente Santi, the mad scientist that invented Brunello di Montalcino, we are going to drink a whole bottle in his honor, and we are going to give a whole bottle review. I shall return as soon as I am recovered from my wine hangover. I return fully recovered from my hangover and ready to give you my whole bottle review of what turned out to be a fantastic bottle of the 2016 Livio Sassetti Brunello di Montalcino. And as you can see, I have taken notes. I can take notes and drink at the same time. So let me tell you what happened as I went through this bottle, and then I'm going to give you my final whole bottle review score, because this was a beauty. This one started off with a lot of red fruits and leather. I found it to be very well balanced. The leather kind of predominated with the red fruits sitting on top of that. I thought that was a great start to the wine. It wasn't harsh, it wasn't tangy, but I thought there was room for it to evolve and change. And that's what I wanted to see. Would it change? Would it evolve? What would happen? Would it move me? Would it evoke emotions? Well, here's what happened as I went through the bottle. What was really cool was more red fruits started to show up with every sip. I thought that was kind of unusual. I would say it started out with some tart cherry, some raspberry, but then some cranberry appeared, some pomegranate, a little bit more red cherry, maybe a little bit of black cherry. All these fruits started to kind of pop up, and once they pop up, they began to stay. And I thought that was kind of a really, really neat experience. And so you got these wonderful red fruits showing up, a lot of leather, and they just began to stretch out and get longer and longer. And then as we got into glass 2, some licorice started to show up, some herbs started to show up, but they didn't show up in front of the fruit. They showed up behind the fruit, and that's what I really like. Look, I'm an American. I like fruit in my wine, and it kind of seemed like everything that was showing up was there to support the fruit and to support the leather. So where it started, as I went along with it, all these other things started to appear, and they stayed. Now, as I got into glass 3, what was really, really neat was each sip just started to lengthen out. Always the fruit first, but it would lengthen out. So maybe I would get a little bit of tart raspberry, but there would be a little bit of herb in it. Then there would be a little bit of licorice. I was like, oh my God, this is really, really fantastic. And so all these fruits just began popping up. Probably when I got to the end of glass 3, it did begin to trigger some emotions. I felt happy because I was drinking wine, but I want to see, does my state of happiness change a little bit? And the answer was yes. I started to feel a little bit giddy, not too much, not overdone, but it did trigger a feeling of anticipation as well. That's what I really, really liked about this. It's so hard to find anticipation anymore because of all this instant gratification. But I found myself anticipating not just the next sip, but like the next 2, the next 3. What would happen? Where would it take me? And I was not disappointed. So yes, I got some emotions of giddiness and most importantly of anticipation. Now I didn't really get any like old memories coming up, so it wasn't quite in that range. But when I put everything together, particularly the way the red fruits just kind of popped up, lengthened, it was like the wine gained momentum as I went through it. And that's what I love to see. Momentum toward this fantastic finish. And of course I had some emotion with the last sip because I was out of wine, but I wanted more. All in all, this was a fantastic bottle, so I am going to give the Livio Sassetti Brunello di Montalcino 2016 a whole bottle review of 98. Highly recommend this wine, and my suspicion is if I got another bottle and waited 10 years, it might get up to 99 or so. We're going to go with a whole bottle review score of 98, and hey, if you have any fantastic Brunello di Montalcinos that you've had a similar experience with, leave them in the comment section. I want to hear from them. I want to drink them. I might even give a whole bottle review. What's better than one whole bottle review? A second whole bottle review, and I've got a beauty for you coming right up.